Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we really try to extract those essential insights and aha moments from fascinating sources. You're tuned into BookCast FM, and our whole goal is bringing books to life, one cast at a time. Today we're diving head first into a really foundational work, Richard Rumelt's Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, The Difference and Why It Matters. This isn't just, another business book, not at all. It's a powerful argument against all that vague, wishful thinking that so often gets called strategy. Rumelt just strips it right down to its core, to what actually works. So for you listening, our mission today is pretty clear. Figure out why so much strategy is actually, bad strategy, as Rumelt puts it. But more importantly, how do you spot it? And how do you actually craft genuinely good strategy? This deep dive should give you a real shortcut to understanding what effective strategy looks like, and maybe even more valuable, how to see when it's missing.
Absolutely. And this stuff isn't just academic theory, Rumelt's ideas are hugely respected. We're talking CEOs, military leaders, policymakers. He makes this complex field feel really tangible, demystified even. You'll find these concepts are surprisingly applicable, whether it's a big corporate challenge or even just a personal project you're thinking about.
I totally agree. It feels like everyone talks about strategy, but often it's just buzzwords, right? Rumelt tackles that straight away.
Yeah.
What are those first red flags he points out? The signs that say, hang on, this isn't real strategy.
Right. The first big one, and maybe the most common, is what he calls fluff. You read something that sounds incredibly important, uses all these big abstract words, but at the end you're thinking, what did that actually mean?
Right.
Rumelt has this great quote. He calls fluff gibberish masquerading as strategic concepts. It creates this illusion of high-level thinking.
Okay. So fancy words covering up a lack of actual thought.
Exactly. And beyond the fluff, another huge sign of bad strategy is failing to actually define the problem. A real strategy has to start by saying, here's the challenge we're trying to overcome. If you skip that, you're basically lost from the start.
That makes sense. You can't solve something if you haven't defined it.
Precisely. And then there's the classic mistake of confusing goals with strategy. You hear it all the time. Our strategy is to double market share, or we're going to be number one.
Right. Those are outcomes, desirable outcomes maybe, but not a plan.
Spot on. It's just wishful thinking if you don't specify how you'll get there. Rumelt is very clear. Bad strategy is long on goals and short on policy or action. And one last thing here is just having bad strategic objectives. Maybe too many of them, or they conflict, or they're just not linked to any clear guiding idea. It leads to scattered effort, wasted resources, like you said, no real plan.
And you see this play out, don't you? The sources mention that fictional aerospace company. Their grand strategy, just become the global leader, period.
Yeah.
Know how. Sounds good, maybe, but totally useless for guiding decisions.
Exactly. Or think about Enron. All those lofty values and vision statements. Pure fluff, really. It masked a complete lack of strategic clarity underneath. What looked good couldn't hide the emptiness.
So why is this bad stuff so common then, if it's so ineffective?
That's a great question. Rumelt points to a few things. One is simply an inability or maybe unwillingness to choose. Leaders hate making hard trade-offs. They try to be everything to everyone, so you get these watered-down, fragmented efforts.
Trying to please everyone, ending up pleasing no one strategically.
Right. Another big factor is what he calls template-style planning. Just filling in the boxes on a standard strategy template without any deep, original thought about the specific situation.
The check-the-box exercise.
Yeah, exactly. And underlying a lot of it is just fundamentally misunderstanding strategy as simply setting ambitious goals, confusing the target with the path. Rumelt really hits it home when he says, bad strategy flourishes because it is so much easier to do than good strategy. It's often the path of least resistance.
Okay, so that's the bad stuff to avoid.
Yeah.
Let's flip it. What does Rumelt say good strategy actually is? He talks about the kernel, right?
Yes, the kernel. It's the absolute core of good strategy, and it's elegant in its simplicity. 3 essential parts. First, a diagnosis. This isn't just describing the situation, it's identifying the critical challenge. What's the crux of the problem? It simplifies the complexity.
So figuring out what's really going on.
Exactly. Second, a guiding policy. This is your overall approach to dealing with the challenge identified in the diagnosis. It's the logic that guides your actions. It sets the direction.
Like the overall game plan.
Kind of, yeah. It channels energy.
Yeah.
And third, coherent action. These are the specific steps you take to implement the guiding policy. And crucially, they have to be coherent. They need to work together, reinforce each other, create a cumulative effect, not just random initiatives.
Diagnosis, guiding policy, coherent action.
Got it. That's the kernel. Rumelt's core quote is right there. The kernel of a strategy contains 3 elements: a diagnosis, a guiding policy, and coherent action. Miss one, and it falls apart.
And the examples really make this concrete, like the U.S. Cold War strategy. George Kennan's diagnosis was key. The Soviet Union had deep internal weaknesses despite looking strong.
Right, that was the critical insight.
The guiding policy became containment, limit their expansion, let internal pressures build, not direct attack, but patience and pressure.
A clear logic.
And the coherent actions followed. Military alliances like NATO, economic aid like the Marshall Plan, political support, all designed to reinforce that containment policy.
A perfect example of the kernel in action.
Or in business. That Wells Fargo example from the 90s is powerful.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Their diagnosis: physical branches are getting way too expensive, and digital is the future.
They saw the shift coming.
So the guiding policy was bold, pivot hard to digital, cut back drastically on branches.
A tough call, but clear.
And the coherent actions: layoffs, huge tech investments, changing how they marketed themselves. Painful, yes, but strategically aligned. It really shows how decisive that guiding policy has to be.
It does. It connects the what's going on to the what we're going to do about it and the how we'll do it.
Okay, so you've got the kernel.
Sure.
Diagnosis, policy, actions. But how do you make it truly powerful? Give it real impact. Rumelt talks about sources of power. And one thing he mentions is how good strategy is often, well, unexpected. It seems to leverage some kind of insight.
That's a really important point. Having the kernel is necessary, but it's not always sufficient for, breakthrough success. Good strategy isn't usually formulaic. It often surprises people because it involves a creative leap, a different way of looking at things. It creates leverage, as Rumelt calls it, magnifying the effect of your resources, finding that point where a focused effort yields big results.
Leverage. Getting more bang for your buck, strategically speaking.
Exactly. And he says, the most powerful strategies arise from a very special kind of insight. An insight into the leverage that will make the strategy work. It's about seeing an angle others miss.
The examples of this are fascinating. Operation Desert Storm in '91.
Classic.
Everyone expected a head-on fight in Kuwait. But Schwarzkopf's plan, that huge left hook through the desert, totally unexpected.
Completely flanked them, leveraged the terrain and assumptions about coalition capabilities.
It wasn't just about having more tanks. It was about where and how they were used based on that insight.
Precisely. Or think about Apple in '97. Steve Jobs comes back, the company's a mess, tons of products.
Bleeding cash.
Right. And his move, cut 70% of the products.
Yes.
Focus ruthlessly on just a few with amazing design and quality.
Which seemed crazy at the time. Conventional wisdom was more products, more market segments.
Exactly. It defied conventional wisdom, but it was a powerful, unexpected strategic choice that leveraged focus. It saved the company.
And Cisco in the 90s. Their strategy wasn't just about competing directly.
No, their leverage came from acquiring key technologies, buying smaller companies to build this integrated network of capabilities. Smart leverage.
Or even going way back, Napoleon concentrating his forces on weak points instead of fighting everywhere at once, finding that leverage point.
Same principle. Concentrate force where it has disproportionate effect. That insight is often the heart of powerful strategy. And this ties into 2 other ideas Rumelt emphasizes: strategy as design and the concept of chain link systems.
Design. How so?
Well, strategy isn't just crunching numbers or analyzing data. It's also about designing a coherent set of actions. Like an architect designs a building where all the parts fit together and serve the overall purpose. It's intentional construction, not just random pieces.
Okay, so the policies and actions need to be crafted to work together harmoniously.
Precisely. And that leads to chain link systems. Think of a literal chain. How strong is it?
Only as strong as its weakest link.
Exactly. In a business or any organization, overall performance is often limited by the weakest part of the system. You can improve the strong parts all you want, but if one critical link is weak, the whole system underperforms. Good strategy often involves identifying and fixing that weakest link.
Finding the bottleneck, the constraint.
Right. It's about understanding that interdependence.
That makes so much sense. IKEA is a fantastic example, isn't it?
Perfect example.
Everything fits together. The flat pack furniture, the huge out-of-town stores, the self-assembly, the catalog, the meatballs.
Yes, even the meatballs.
Each part supports the others to deliver that unique value proposition. Affordable, stylish furniture. break one link, say the flat pack design, and the whole model collapses.
It's a tightly designed system. Apple's ecosystem is similar.
Right. Hardware, software, the app store, the retail experience, it's all designed to work together seamlessly. That coherence is the strategy, in a way.
It is. It creates a powerful, integrated advantage.
Okay, so we've got the kernel, leverage through insight, and this idea of strategic design and chain links. What about focus and advantage? Rumelt talks a lot about those too.
Absolutely central. Focus is about deliberately concentrating your resources, your energy, your attention on a narrow set of objectives. It's about being disproportionately good at the things that matter most for your strategy. And this is critical. It means having the discipline to say, and no.
Saying no to opportunities. That sounds counterintuitive sometimes.
It can feel that way, but spreading yourself too thin is a classic strategic error. Saying no to things that are outside your focus allows you to excel at the things inside your focus.
Okay, discipline is key. And how does growth fit in? Is growth itself a strategy?
Rumelt is very clear on this. No, growth is not a strategy. Growth is the reward you get from executing a good strategy that successfully exploits an advantage.
So chase advantage, and growth might follow. Don't just chase growth for growth's sake.
Precisely. Pursuing growth without a solid advantage often leads to trouble, lower profits, more complexity, losing your edge. His quote is direct. Growth is not a strategy. It's the reward of good strategy.
Got it. So what exactly is this advantage we need to focus on?
Advantage is basically an asymmetry. Something that sets you apart from competitors in a meaningful way. It could be a lower cost structure, unique technology, a stronger brand, better customer relationships, superior insights. It's often quite specific, quite narrow, but powerful.
And difficult for others to copy or overcome.
Ideally, yes. That's what makes it sustainable.
The examples really help here. Southwest Airlines,
Yeah.
their focus was intense.
Absolutely. Short haul, low cost, point to point, only 737s. That relentless focus gave them huge operational advantages, fast turnarounds, high asset utilization.
They said no to long haul, no to complex hub and spoke, no to multiple plane types.
And that focus created a cost advantage competitors just couldn't match easily. Walmart's early expansion, too.
Right, clustering stores to maximize supply chain efficiency.
That was their scalable advantage. Built region by region, Toyota's lean manufacturing, a whole system advantage.
Almost impossible to replicate piece by piece.
Exactly. Or Dell's original build-to-order model. Huge cost and working capital advantage through supply chain focus. These are all about leveraging a specific focused advantage.
It seems like there's also a time element here. It's not just what you do, but when you do it, and how you handle the inevitable resistance.
Spot on. Good strategy has to consider dynamics. How is the landscape changing? Technology, competitors, customer needs. They're always evolving. Great strategists anticipate these shifts. They don't just react. Think of Intel in the 80s.
The pivot from memory chips.
Right. They saw memory becoming a commodity dominated by Japanese firms. They made the incredibly hard choice to exit memory and bet everything on microprocessors.
Anticipating the PC revolution.
Exactly. Contrast that with, say, Nokia. They dominated feature phones but completely missed the shift to smartphones. They failed to read and act on the changing dynamics.
A painful lesson in ignoring dynamics.
A very painful lesson. And even if you have a great strategy, you have to fight against internal forces, inertia and entropy.
Inertia, like organizational laziness, resistance to change.
Pretty much. Especially in successful organizations. We've always done it this way. It's hard to change a winning formula even when the game is changing.
And entropy, things just falling apart over time.
Yeah, the natural tendency towards disorder. Policies get diluted, focus drifts, coordination weakens. You have to actively fight entropy to keep a strategy coherent and effective.
Like General Motors' long slide. Decades of resisting change. Internal silos. Inertia, 1.
A classic case. Compare that to IBM under Lou Gerstner. He came in and actively fought the inertia, broke down silos, forced the company to change. He understood he had to combat both inertia and entropy.
Okay, so putting this all together, what does it mean for us? For someone listening who wants to be more strategic, how do you cultivate that mindset?
That's the crucial question. Rumelt emphasizes that strategy isn't magic or just gut feeling. It demands rigorous thinking, almost like a science in a way. You diagnose the problem, you form a hypothesis that's your guiding policy, and then you test it through action, learning, and adapting as you go.
So it's an iterative process, not a one-shot deal.
Definitely. He says, a good strategy doesn't pop fully formed from a vision. It emerges from thoughtful diagnosis and a well-reasoned response. And he talks about qualities of a strategic thinker. Things like anticipation, being hypothesis-driven, having that intense focus, a sense for design, how things fit together, and importantly, judgment, making calls under uncertainty.
Seeing through the fog.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Seeing through the fog of complexity and noise, and having the courage to challenge the status quo or groupthink when the evidence points another way.
It's not necessarily about being the smartest, maybe, but asking the right questions.
I think that's a huge part of it. Questioning assumptions, digging deeper.
So for you listening, this is really actionable. Strategy is a skill you can develop. It's a discipline. You can start by cultivating clarity. Question assumptions, your own and others. Learn constantly. Practice zooming out to see the big picture, then zooming right back in for focused action. Where does effort really count? Be willing to challenge convention if the facts support it. Think in systems. How do the pieces connect? And maybe most importantly, reflect. Learn from what works and what doesn't. That's how you build that judgment Rumelt talks about.
That's perfectly put. It really does raise that question for everyone in your own work or life. How do you start building those muscles? How do you make strategic thinking a regular practice?
Well, that brings us towards the end of this deep dive. Richard Rumelt's Good Strategy, Bad Strategy really hammers home a vital message. Strategy isn't just fancy talk or wish lists. It's a craft. It demands clarity, sharp focus, and deliberate, coherent action. It's about tackling real challenges with smarts and alignment.
Couldn't agree more. So, maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Think about a challenge you're facing right now, big or small, work or personal. Can you apply Rumelt's kernel? Can you really nail the diagnosis? Can you articulate a clear guiding policy? And can you outline genuinely coherent actions? Or maybe looking around your environment. Can you now spot some bad strategy masquerading as the real thing? That fluff, those vague goals.
Hopefully you've gained some practical tools and maybe a shift in perspective today, helping you identify and even craft better strategy. If this discussion sparked your interest and you want the full picture, we absolutely recommend getting a copy of Richard Rumelt's Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. It's a classic for a reason. You'll find a link to purchase the book right there in the description of this deep dive. Please do support the author. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of strategic thinking. This has been the Deep Dive from BookCast FM, where we're always bringing books to life one cast at a time. We look forward to our next exploration with you.